Nice to see all of you. I'm definitely mic'd now. So today's class, recently I've been doing a series of our whole lineage, our Buddhist lineage. And so that's called a tanka or a painting, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But today, I thought I was first inspired because of our statuary. These are all new statues. Some of you might not know that they were installed a few months ago and consecrated. So in our lineage, normally in a Buddhist center you have a Buddha, but this is a different style of Buddha called Dorje Chang. And then these are different saints that brought our lineage to life. From India first, this is Tilopa, Naropa, Marpa's in the middle case, the stout man with the blue hair. And then Milarepa is more the yogi smiling. His name is also Laughing Vajra. And then this is Gampopa with the red head. And then this is the first Karmapa. Is that me? We are now on number 17. This is a statue of a Tara. This is green Tara. And then over here, the very large statue, this is Chenrezig of the practice we do, often the four-armed Chenrezig. These statues I showed a video the last time I taught on how they were made and cast into Nepal. And then our teachers came here. Well, first we had a group of us for maybe a year, roll mantras and gather all kinds of little things that were put inside of all the statuary. And then the teachers came and consecrated them with prayers and song, and we were all part of that. And then this is, basically a lot of this is the same as that one column. This is the four-arm Buddha there. He's normally very blue, so I keep forgetting, but usually when they're made into statues, they're just out of gold. It's considered the highest thing to offer. So this is Vajradhara Dorje Chang. And then the upper left, these two are yogis that teachers, that they brought Buddhism. They kind of got Buddhism moving more during a second generation of Buddhism around year 800, 900, current era. And then teachers from Tibet. So then this is called the shorter lineage. And today we're talking about Marpa, who is the more stout gentleman there in the middle with the blue hair. And then Tibetans love blue-black hair, so they always depict things with blue. But normally he's very kind of red and kind of looks a little. And then his main student was Milarepa, who is more the yogi in the second one down there on the inner right. And he is often green because of what he ate, which were mostly nettles, when he lived in India and Nepal. So that's what we're going to talk on today. So I just wanted to let you know, we do a very specific practice where we visualize all of this in the sky in front of us. So these are, and this is also Dorje Chang, but a bigger version. These are all the Karmapas are here that are keeping the lineage going today. And so this is all of the Buddha, and then all of the lamas, but then here are other bodhisattvas, here are Buddhas, here are protectors, yidams, and here are the protectors for our lineage. And this is all of us prostrating to this, because this is all in this beautiful lake. And the sky is just filled with all kinds of blessings. So you can all sit down. I just wanted to make sure you knew what we're looking at here. Thank you. Get comfy, and if you ever need to go to the restroom, the restroom's right outside the door. So in front of you is probably a prayer. Normally we don't like to put them on the floor if we can help it. And we're going to just read the shorter side, which says Refuge Prayer. First we're going to read it, then we're going to have a few moments of quiet. So for people that are at home, greetings. Thank you so much for your patience. And thanks to Dawn for everything and getting you in here with us. How many people are here today? Online, we're not sure yet. So today we're talking about Marpa and Milarepa's life, who are some of the core teachers that went to Tibet, went from Tibet to India to bring Buddhism to where it is today. They're actually the founders of our lineage. So first we'll do the refuge prayer. I'm going to chant it with a tune. First we'll do it in Tibetan, where it says Sanjay Chudang, that's transliteration. And then we'll do it once that way, and once we'll do it in English. I'm going to first hit a note, and then you can join in with me and sing. And don't worry how you sound, everything's perfect. And normally, because this is a prayer to our entire lineage, we put our hands in prayer at our heart. But you don't have to do any of that, just relax. Om Sanjay Chodan Soki Chodam La Jan Chu Bardu Dani Gyatsochi Daki Gensok Ki Pesonam Ki Drala Benchir Sanjay Druparsho. And in English, and the Buddha, the Dharma, and the assembly most excellent, I take refuge until I reach enlightenment. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I achieve enlightenment for the sake of all beings. So the first two lines, this is a prayer. Once you become Buddhist, this is sort of one of your, oh, this is so great as a fan too, one of your main prayers. The first two lines are taking refuge in the Buddha. The Dharma is the teachings, and the assembly most excellent are the enlightened and the ordinary community. And so I'm part of the ordinary. You can choose what you are. No, I'm joking. The last two lines are actually taking the Bodhisattva vow. So how do we take it? We do it through the 6 paramitas, such as generosity and patience and contemplation. So that's why it says, by the merit of generosity and other good deeds, that refers to all of them. May I achieve enlightenment for the sake of all beings. So everything we do as Buddhists is for the benefit of all living beings, no matter how imperfect or perfect you think it is. So we'll do the other prayers afterwards. So if we can, just for a moment, and again, I always like to remind everyone, we have an ongoing beginning Buddhism course going on right now that you're more than welcome to attend. I will not get upset. It's fine. Or if at any time you need to leave early, or if this just doesn't fit for you, that's fine. We have such a variety of teachers. I think it's nice to realize that. And there's restrooms right outside the door if you need that. And we always have snacks on the lower level. So let's just take a moment. I'm going to hit the gong a few times. Wow, this is a really thick clacker. This is mostly for me to calm down. Make sure to breathe. Just let it go. All right, let's begin. I have to have my trusty watch with me. So today's talk is sort of a continuation, kind of history of Buddhism 101 regarding the Tibetans. Our center is considered Tibetan Buddhism or Himalayan Buddhism, what we follow. And our name is Columbus, for Columbus, Ohio, Karma Texum Chuling. So we're of the Karma Kagyu lineage. And Texum means the 3 turnings of the wheel of what the Buddha taught. And Chuling is the garden of Buddhism. So essentially, in Columbus, Ohio, we have this beautiful garden where we practice many different styles of Buddhism. And that is how Tibetan Buddhists in Vajrayana, we practice Hinayana, Mahayana. So we work with the self, we work with compassion, and then we work with the swifter vehicle of Vajrayana, where we do a lot of visualizations of deities and slowly begin to learn how to realize the nature of our mind. So let's talk about the two teachers today. They're very much linked because I would say one is yin, maybe one is yang, and one is yin. Marpa, the stouter character with more the reddish face, usually, he was a lay person, meaning he was married and had children, and he was never monastic, and he lived over 1,000 years ago in Tibet. So we have to kind of change how we think for a moment. Oh, he was born around year 1012, current era. And he died when he was around 84, 86. He, at a very young age, I think was very precocious and very brilliant and a challenge, maybe, to his parents. So they quickly sent him off to school somewhere to learn Sanskrit because it was a different era of Buddhism had been taken to Tibet long before that, but because of different kings and things, it was kind of they got rid of a lot of things. So then suddenly Buddhism became very popular again, and that's why at this time there were many translators. And so Marpa's title is Marpa Lotsawa, or Marpa the translator, because normally you didn't learn Sanskrit unless you were going to become a translator and go down into India. So first he learned Sanskrit and was very skilled. So they, of course, in Tibet, they speak mostly Tibetan. There's different dialects, and it looks a little bit like Sanskrit, but it's in no way related. So first he learned Sanskrit, then he started to learn different dialects in Nepal for Nepal, because if Tibet is kind of, China's kind of here, Tibet's kind of here, and Nepal is right along the border, the bottom of that, and then India is down here. So in order to get from Tibet into India, you have to go through Nepal. So he learned Nepali first, and then later he started learning different dialects in India. So finally, after maybe 10, 15 years, he went back to his family and said, I'm not going to stay here. I'm going to become a translator and travel my whole life. And he traveled over 20-some years back and forth to India. And he had fallen in love with Buddhism by studying so much. And when he studied Sanskrit, of course, he studied a great deal of Buddhist text. And he wanted to meet the real teachers that were down in India, because at that time there weren't many teachers in Tibet. So he wasn't married yet, and in order to go to India, there was no trains, no cars, no planes, no jets. And he had enough money. I think he had a horse for a while, but then he sold it later on, because in those days, if you went from Tibet all the way down to India, the people figured you were going to have money on you. So he had to amass gold, because gold was the easiest thing to carry back then. And of course, take a lot of his food with him and things, and other beautiful objects that he could trade with. So he spent several years doing that. Then he went into Nepal, and just by chance, he ran into two students of Naropa, who I talked about the last time. So he was a yogi that had been very much of a scholarly teacher. So I'll talk about him first. We're talking about somebody that's living in India. He lived in a Buddhist monastery. This was about 50 years before I'm talking about. And he started having visions. And one was of an older woman came to him and said to him, do you understand the text that you're reading? Can you read this? And he said, yes. And she said, do you understand it? Really understand it? And he said, of course. And the old woman started to weep, and she said, no, you don't. And this is who you should go see. So he left the monastery, which seems to be a theme here, and had to go and study with his teacher later on, and later became what we call a lineage holder. So all the people that I'm talking about mostly are lineage holders, meaning they're kind of really special on their acuity, their ability, and their connection with Buddhism. So that's Naropa. And Naropa left the monastery, was no longer a monk. Well, I'm not sure if he was a monk or not, But he lived a life of what we would call today as a yogi. He lived in the jungles. They didn't have big monasteries where he was at. They were always wandering. They had circuits where they would go to different places, and he would teach Buddhism. But not many students were ready for what he had been taught. And then suddenly, after, of course, Marpa, it took him 2 years or 3 just to go through Nepal and get used to the heat, because the heat of India is very different. He was living at probably 10 to 12,000 feet altitude in Tibet. And so suddenly, he's going to be going down to the Ganjanic plains of India, the Ganges. So it's pretty much 0 altitude, but very humid and hot. So those 2 monks that were students in Naropa said, we're going to give you a letter. We're going to start you on some different meditation practices. But you definitely have to go to India to meet up with Naropa. So after several years of acclimating to Nepal, which was probably about 8,000 feet, he then went down into India. So all of this took months. We're not talking, I'll see you next week. No, I lived in India for a year, and I remember you could say to people, yeah, I'll see you in 3 weeks, because we never knew, when you travel. And his traveling was so different from what we could imagine. And what really surprised me in my studies is, in all the pictures I've ever seen of Marpa, he looks almost regal. His beautiful clothes, beautiful brocade clothes. He looks very put together. But when he lived in India, he lived as a yogi. He lived in the jungles with all his teachers. So he finally met his teacher, Naropa. Immediately they connected. And Naropa realized how skilled he was and how ripe he was to learn Buddhism. So he slowly started teaching him on things some of you that are familiar with. I'll give you an example. The things that he learned and practiced and mastered are the practices that they still do today in 3-year retreat. Chakrasambhara, Vajrayogini, Guhya Samayaja, He Vajra, the 6 yogas of Naropa. So he started learning this, and he was with him the first time for over 20 years. 12 years, the first time. And Naropa's style of teaching was very interesting. He was really a master of all the practices, but he chose to have Marpa go to maybe the original lineage holder of that practice. So he had great adventures, and his books kind of read like really cool travel. I don't know. I love travel books, so it's sort of like travels of Marpa, and he met some really amazing characters, I think. But they were so happy to share their lineage. They would always say, well, I don't know why he sent you to me when you already have Naropa, but Naropa wanted him to be called a lineage holder, so he went to the roots of each of the teachings. And he was unique in that. I don't know about you, but when I go for a really special teaching, maybe I'll go home and read my notes a few times and try and practice it and apply it. But he mastered each one. That's why he stayed there so long. So eventually Naropa said, okay, you need to leave, but I want you to come back, and next time we're going to do this, this, and this, and review all that you've already done. And so that's what he did. He went back to Tibet. He got married. He was able to get money from his family's estate and have his own home. And so he was basically a farmer. They often show him with hoes, not whores, but hoes, that you work in the garden. And he's often shown doing that. So later on, I'm going to introduce Milarepa, because Milarepa was his main student. But Marpa went back to India 2 other times. And the first time he went back into Tibet when he left India, nobody knew what a gem he had become. They just thought he was just this old farmer. And by then he was probably in his 40s. So then he went to Tibet. He mostly just practiced, and would go and try and fundraise so for his next trip. And he did that 2 more times. And so, this is kind of the juncture where Milarepa came into his life. So I think what is important, why he stands out for a lot of us, and we don't study a lot about him. His student was much more flamboyant. Marpa was very grounded, very much a very different type of practitioner. But he's very important in our lineage because he really is considered one of the forefathers, the main forefather of our lineage, of our Karma Kagyu lineage. So, so he went back the second time to India, and it was much easier because he had been there before. Met all the same teachers, and then he would be told about other teachers he was to meet. He met Maitripa, and he ran into Atisha at certain points. And then the third time, he had visions that it was time to go back to India because Naropa wanted to teach him some of the Poa practices and end-of-life practices. And on his way back to India, he learned that Naropa had left his body, but he was still teaching because Naropa had a lot of powers. So, and was able to still teach even though he had left his human body. So eventually, after many, many months of looking for him, he got those teachings and went back. And he was pretty old by then. His family was very upset he'd gone back to India. It's so old and so alone. He always went alone. One of my favorite stories about him is the first time there was another translator that was hanging out with him that was a little jealous. They would compare notes, like they would go to a little tea shop and compare notes. And Marpa realized he was getting a very different education than this other person who was very scholarly and wanted to learn things a special way. And they got onto a boat, and the oarsman knocked all of his books from all those 12 years of study into the river. And Marpa, by then, had psychic abilities and realized that it wasn't the oarsman. The oarsman was made to do it by the other translator. And at that moment, he freaked out. He thought, oh, I should just go back to India and so I could write all these notes down, because he knew how he was the main person that brought this all back to Tibet. None of this was in Tibet yet. And then he realized he knew it all. He knew it all by heart. And so then he had very different confidence of, I don't know about you, but I love my notes. I'm really a note taker. But sometimes there's a point where you have to put the notes aside and absorb it all. And that's what he realized he had done. So, and then he had many students by then. Then he became very famous, and the students all would go to his farm, and he would train them. And when he died, he just flew off into the sky, and he disappeared. His body had passed, and they all saw his spirit leave. And then later he was put into a stupa, his human body. So he died in his 80s. So then kind of going on slightly around the same time, so maybe after his first trip, so his first trip to India was 12 years, the second was, I believe, 6, and the third was 3 years. So he spent over 20 years with his teacher, and we're not talking about just sort of seeing your teacher once in a while. He was with his teacher, really at the side of his teacher for that amount of time. So it gives me great confidence that we're doing practices over 1,000 years old, and they still have the same effect today because of that. So now let's talk about this other person by the name of Milarepa. Milarepa is famous throughout Tibet. People love him, love his songs, and his story is very unique. He was raised in a rather wealthy family in Tibet, and at the age of 7, his father died, and his uncle and his aunt took all the fortune of the family and said, don't worry, we're going to manage your money, because he wasn't allowed to manage the money until he was 15. He had a mother and a sister. They were turned into slaves by that family. They worked in the fields and were given very little food and kicked out of their home. And the mother was furious. She just wanted revenge. So when he reached 15, the mother had a meeting with the family saying, now is his time that he can get back the property. And they said, oh, no, It's no longer yours. We're not giving it back. So she was beside herself, and she said to Milarepa, who was, a 15-year-old boy that wants to make his mom happy, and she said, there is a teacher in the village next door, down the road, and he's a sorcerer. I want you to learn how to kill that family. So Milarepa was so good as a meditator, he immediately learned, not too much training, he wiped out an entire village of 35 people. He killed them all due to a terrible hailstorm. His gift was being able to make hailstorms happen. And he had incredible remorse. He was beside himself with what had happened. His mother was thrilled, but he was very upset. He left home, and he decided he needed to see a teacher. And he saw different teachers, but not many of them really wanted to see a little sorcerer come at them. What if this guy gets mad? So he decided he wanted the best teacher there was, and he had heard about Marpa. And he met Marpa at one of the times when Marpa was working on the farm. He was not in India. So he was at home, and Marpa immediately, because of his supercognition, realized who this kid was. And he treated him very differently than all the other students. Most of the people would show up, and Marpa immediately would teach them. He would not teach them anything. He realized he had to really purify himself. So he said, you can either stay here for free, but I will not teach you, or I'll teach you, but I will not pay for your room and board. So Marpa had to beg. He said, I'm here to learn teachings. But then Marpa said, but I'm not going to teach you the ordinary way. So for many years, he made him, instead of teaching him these really high, lofty meditations, he had him build a tower for his son. And one of the towers is still standing. I believe there were 9 towers he had to build. And one is still standing today in Tibet. And it was an incredible hardship. Milarepa would build half of it, and Marpa would show up and say, no, I don't like that. I want you to take it completely apart, put every piece of stone back where it was, and start over there. And so his student, Milarepa, never questioned him. He just said, yes, all right. And so he did that, and he had incredible faith in him. And after many years of hardships, he realized he wanted to kill himself because he was so upset he couldn't get any teachings. Because you have to realize, he was often right there when all the students were coming from all around the world or around Tibet to get these teachings, but he couldn't even listen to them. So he had a very profound moment, and suddenly he realized that all of this was to purify himself of his negative karma of killing all those people. And so this is why he's so loved by Tibetans, because he's us. He blew it, right? He made mistakes. Marpa kind of didn't seem to make a lot of mistakes. People love the one that is human, and so this is just sort of the beginning of his spiritual world, his spiritual training. Marpa had been told by his teachers in India that Milarepa, this yogi, this young man, was going to be very famous, was going to be a very accomplished practitioner. And he was. He was trained in everything Marpa learned. He became his lineage holder. He gave him every teaching he had gotten over time. But he didn't live in a monastery, which is kind of unusual. A lot of our teachers today had been in monasteries or in the past, but he never lived in a monastery. He mostly lived in caves. And as the years went on, he, after many, many years of practice, he became enlightened. His goal was to become enlightened in one lifetime. Right from the start, he wanted the best teacher, and he wanted the best results, because he knew his life was going to be very different. And he had great hardships, but this is why he was so loved by everyone. In Tibet, there's a tradition called Namtar, which is where people write. It's not exactly a poem, but it's kind of like a song poem. It's, where they write out their experience, but they sing it. And he had a beautiful voice, and he wrote he wrote over 100,000 different namtars and different songs about all the different experiences he had when he was living in caves. So he would be in a cave and suddenly, I couldn't believe all the different people that came to him. I remember one story, he was meditating and suddenly a rabbit came in and so did a deer, and they were sitting next to him, and right out the mouth of the cave was a hunter, arrow pulled, and he threatened Milarepa, I'm gonna, kill you if you don't give me back my animals. And the animals were not leaving him. And so he didn't even challenge him. He had such confidence in the Dharma and knowing that the true nature of this person was really a kind person. And the huntsman was so shocked that he didn't yell at him. He was just very kind to him, that he stayed with him for quite some time and no longer killed animals. And so, or he would have a group of people just come for instruction, but these would be, and the instructions were all written down. So we have this record. And I was reading, Julaine, have you ever read any of the 100,000 songs? They're just so beautiful. And they often tell, and the stories are very well translated now, they often tell of like the circumstance of why this is taught and why that was taught. And they are so profound. And to this day, there are plays done about Milarepa. And so let's talk about his diet. So he's often seen very, very gaunt, and you could count all his ribs, because he was in such an altered state. It was too much work to go out and get food or to go beg for food. So, but he loved nettles, or maybe, I don't say love them, but nettles grew. Are any of you familiar with what nettles are? In America, we have them, but when I lived, all right, I'm gonna tell, I have enough time to give a little personal here. So I lived in India and Nepal for almost 1 year. And I was with a group called the Marpa Institute of Translators. So I was kind of new to Buddhism. It sort of never dawned on me that we were actually going to go from India all the way to Nepal. And we actually went to one of the caves where Milarepa lived. And it was pretty wild. And I'll never forget, but we had to go up in different groups because the land can't handle a lot of people. It's very, very fragile. And so there was not a structure there. They were working on it, but they're always having earthquakes there. So we slept out under the stars. My husband's with me out there. He was with me. And I was with a group of 4 people, and we had the bearers with it that were bringing up supplies for the whole monastery that they were going to build, but they never did. And one of the women in the group, how do I put this nicely? They had to do an exorcism for her. She kind of went a little wild, kind of crazy, probably the altitude. Often if you don't drink enough water at those altitudes, you get a little loopy. And we didn't know what to do with this person. Suddenly she was also almost having seizures, and I wasn't sure what to do. And this Repa shows up. So Milarepa, his name is Mila. He's from the family of Mila. But Repa means white cloth. So he wears a white, instead of wearing burgundy clothes, he would only wear white cotton. He was called a cotton-clad one. So a Repa, a guy in white clothes, shows up. I'm thinking, who is this? And he had all this tea with him, and I'll never forget, I held this woman's ankles down, and somebody else held her arms down. And he pulls out this big bag of rice, and he starts throwing it all over her body. She's kind of writhing around. And suddenly I look around, and there's like a whole village that we never saw before show up. They formed a circle around us. And then he said, hold on tight. And he does this with the rice, and he blows on it. He threw it on her body, and she went like up about this high. And I'm like, this is just out of a movie. And then she woke up and was fine. So I got to really know this guy because he was living at the site where we were going, which was about a half-hour walk. So we lived at one of the caves where Milarepa lived. Milarepa lived in southern India on the border of Nepal. And so that was the main place where Marpa had him do all of his practices. So there were no monasteries there, but there were caves everywhere. So he lived in a very simple cave. And we found out from this person that was a Repa, a yogi, that there was a circuit of 50 of them. And every full moon or every 2 full moons, they would move. But the one thing your job was, if mushrooms grew around, and there were a lot of mushrooms, you harvested them and dried them for the next guy coming on board, the next person that would move in there. Or where we were was filled with nettles, stinging nettles. These beautiful green, lush plants that were about, I'd say 5 feet high. And the soup was it was so full of chlorophyll, you just ate it with rice, that you peed green within days. Green. I won't say anything more what else was green. So that's why Milarepa turned green, and all the pictures depict him green, bluish green. And that's not a mistake. Somebody didn't make a mistake in the art department. You really turn green when you eat that. I'll never forget how well I felt because of all that chlorophyll in that food. But they're called stinging nettles for a reason. You take a skewer of bamboo about almost 3 feet long to pick it because it just bites you. It's just very much, your whole arm will go numb from it. But a lot of the yogis knew all the herbs back then, so they all lived on these things. So anyway, that was my story about stinging nettles. Very long, I'm sorry, I'm very gabby. But so over the years, Milarepa just had amazing people come to him and visit him in his caves. And he became famous. People would always know if there was somebody really special in the region. And he would teach anyone that came to him. He never turned them away. And sometimes people tried to give him things, and he could be very challenging. But it was always done through this beautiful poetry. And so later on, he had very accomplished students, some of whom will be the next talk I give. That will be Gampopa and Rachampa. And they have then kept the lineage going. But Milarepa did all the same practices that are done in retreat. So in Lama Kathy, who's the head Lama here, she did 3-year retreat. And in 3-year retreat, usually you learn one of the Guru Yogas. I believe she did Marpa. And sometimes they do Milarepa or Gampopa. But then there's other practices, which are the ones that came all the way from India, back over 1,000 years ago, that are still being done today. And a great deal of the prayers we even do come from those traditions. So years later, he knew he was getting ready to die. And I'll never forget, His Holiness the Dalai Lama has this great video on YouTube. Unfortunately, the audio is not the greatest. He starts weeping about Milarepa, how beloved he was. Because these songs they were translated into so many languages now. And they're not really songs, they're just, but you can sing them. You can make up your own tunes. It's really cool to hear how people do it. But he was an ordinary person who was put in a very difficult situation on every count. I mean, it sounds like a regular soap opera, doesn't it? Or a movie. They have made movies called Milarepa. And a lot of times when there's a big gathering at prayer festivals, there will be a play about Milarepa. So, and he died later on in his late 80s and had by then knew he was about ready to die and gave all of his transmissions over to his students so the lineage could continue onward. And many miracles. He was supposedly able to fly all over the place. He had all kinds of super qualities. He could heal anyone. But mostly he just really had this big heart and would just never turn anyone away. So my talk's kind of quick today, but are there any questions? I just wanted you to know. And you can find out a lot of this information. I'll mention the books. I'll give them to Don later on. There's a few books that are my favorite books. I think the translations were incredible. Hi. Uh-huh.
I've seen references, this is jumping ahead to your next talk with Gampopa, being the by a teacher, which kind of goes off into another direction. Is he still part of the Kagyu lineage?
Gampopa is. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Atisha's part of a different one. So Atisha kind of touches on a lot of our teachers because a lot of them had some training with him.
but he wasn't the main teacher of Gampopa. Gampopa's main teacher was Milarepa.
Okay.
But I don't have that information on me right now. I'm sorry.
Okay, no,
Yeah.
that's helpful. Thank
Does
you.
that make sense? Yeah, it's very complex. They're all interrelated, which is kind of cool. So there's four, to this modern time, there's four main schools in Buddhism. But in the time back then, there were many more. And there was a lot more crossover, I would say. Because not many people went from India into Tibet, but Atisha was one of them from, so you want me to tell you a story about Atisha? This is one of my favorite, do you mind? Okay, this is actually about Maitripa. Okay, so there seems to be a theme, and this is a controversial story because some of the translators think it's a plot twist on purpose or something, or interjected. But I remember Lama Yeshe Gamso telling me this story, and I never forgot it. This is about Maitripa, who was one of the teachers of Lord Marpa. He's often called Lord Marpa because he wasn't a monk. So back after the Buddha passed, a college was set up, several of them in India, and the biggest one was Nalanda. And Nalanda was famous for the erudite scholars they had in Buddhism, and many Hindu famous philosophers would come and debate with them. And whoever won the debate, the loser had to become whatever that religion was. It was rather interesting how they flip-flopped. But Lord Atisha was a very famous practitioner, and he was one of the main teachers there, and he was considered one of the gatekeepers of this big college. And this is very strict. You were monastic. You did not take any drugs, no sex. You were very much of a celibate monastic. And one night, he walked by, and Maitripa was really a wonderful scholar, just incredible. He walked by Maitripa's room one night as he's locking the doors, and there's Maitripa in sexual union with a woman drinking alcohol. And Atisha just, you're kicked out of here. So Maitripa was expelled. But Maitripa went out with a great flair. So he said, you had a different vision than what I experienced. I was with a goddess, and I was not drinking alcohol. I don't know what he said, some kind of elixir or dutsi. Who knows? Because I am very ordinary, so I would probably think it was with a woman drinking alcohol. But that's not what he claimed. And when he left, they were on a river, I believe it was the Ganges. He took a leaf from a tree and threw it on the top of the water of the Ganges and stepped on it and waved to everyone as he floated down the stream, singing songs of realization. So they say that Atisha, because such a wonderful scholar was kicked out, was then sent to Tibet to tame the wild Tibetans, which he was not thrilled about because Tibetans were pretty uneducated compared to some of the abilities that Atisha had. But Atisha was wonderful. He taught refuge to everyone throughout all of Tibet. So he was called the Refuge Lama. So that's just the story I heard about Maitripa. I always wanted to study more of Maitripa's works, and they're not out there as much. But later on, that college, the same college, invited Maitripa back to be one of the main professors. I don't know. But we're talking over 1,000 years ago. So anyway, are there any other questions? I can get off on side.
Thank you, Lama Kathy, for the teaching. I don't have a question, but I get very inspired by Milarepa and Marpa, because, especially Milarepa,
Yes.
because he stayed in the cave during the winter and lack of food and everything, and
Such hardships.
yes, compared to me, I guess, I'm complaining about all the time complaining about something, but he's like sitting there year after year in the harsh weather and the lack of food, and so he gives me a lot of inspiration. And also Marpa traveling, olden days, you have to, it's not easy to go such a far distance and come back multiple times. So And he kind of did it to, not just kind, but he did it to bring back the teaching so people can, I guess, deal with their life better or easier. So it was just those two, I guess. Well, Naropa also, because he went through a lot of difficulty also, but
A
yeah,
lot.
this-
Oh, the hardships. I looked that up after your last time I saw you.
Yeah.
Yes, he went through great hardships. Yeah.
Right, so it is very inspirational to hear them.
So, is your concern that we're not suffering enough?
No, just
No, they are very inspiring. I mean, that's Namtars really are all about that inspiration, so that we will get our butts on the cushion and practice
Right.
and apply the practice night and day. But they also, Khenpo Rinpoche always talked about this, and he said, you know, many of us think, oh, it's too bad it's not those times. I would probably be a purer person, or I'd be able to practice more. But he said, because of what they did, we don't have to go through that same struggle. We're having our own struggles right now in America and the world. So this is our time to develop incredible compassion for everyone and pray for everyone night and day, but in a different way, a different challenge. But we are blessed by what they did for us. Right. And that we still have the prayer, we even still have the prayers. I mean, that's pretty amazing. And the meditation practices. And people are still becoming enlightened by these practices. It's not just those 2 or 3 people. I mean, I'm a really rough person, and I've even seen changes. I'm even tolerant at times. That's a miracle. So I think, I'm really glad you brought that up, but it's true. They all went, and Tilopa went through challenges. They all went through challenges. I mean, look at all the Tibetans that lost their homeland, that had to leave and come. They were spread out all over the world. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Anyone else? So let's just take a moment. And particularly because of all that's going on right now in the world, we really need to offer the merit for everyone so that they can gain strength, so they're able to help one another, be very tolerant, but never give up compassion and love for everyone. And also thank all of those from the past that have given us these gifts. And may it continue to spread. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for your patience. I'm sorry, I get carried away. All right, let's do one dedication prayer. So just to let you know, if you're ever at home and you don't have this card, it's good to always memorize your refuge prayer if you're already Buddhist. But dedication prayers, I love written ones, but I also like ones that you write up yourself, because our dedications and our inspirations change daily in our circumstances. So that's fine if you do it on your own. We'll say these in English. By this merit, may all attain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy wrongdoing from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. From the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. The courageous Manjushri, who knows everything as it is, Samantabhadra, who also knows in the same way, and all the bodhisattvas, that I may follow in their path, I completely dedicate all of this virtue. So you might say, well, what virtue do I have to dedicate today? Just giving up your Sunday morning, your patience here, your willingness to listen a little bit, that's really very special. So don't put yourself down. Okay, everyone, have a lovely Sunday. And thank you, everyone online. I hope you're all, did anyone have any questions online? I forgot to ask. Nope, okay, good. Okay, bye, everyone.